Jessica Miller was always a little different from the other girls in her small Iowa town. While her classmates spent weekends at the mall or scrolled through social media, Jessica was often out in her grandpa's backyard. He taught her to shoot tin cans off fence posts. Her grandpa, a retired Army Ranger, had shown her everything about firearms, patience, and precision. When Jessica turned 18, she made a decision that surprised everyone in Harmony Creek. She walked into the Army recruitment office one warm Tuesday morning. Her long brown hair was in a simple ponytail. She wore her favorite jeans and worn boots. The recruiter, Sergeant Evans, looked up from his paperwork. Young women didn't usually walk in with such clear purpose. "I want to join the Army," Jessica said. Her voice was steady, even with butterflies in her stomach. She had practiced this dozens of times in front of her bedroom mirror. Sergeant Evans leaned back. "What makes you think you've got what it takes, miss?" Jessica squared her shoulders. "My grandpa served 2 tours in Iraq. He taught me that serving your country isn't about what others expect. It's about what you expect from yourself." Paperwork took hours. Jessica filled out forms, answered questions, and took several tests. When she finally walked out, she had signed on the dotted line. In 6 weeks, she would report to Fort Leonard Wood for basic training. News traveled fast in Harmony Creek. By evening, everyone knew Jessica Miller, the quiet girl who helped herd a hat at the local hardware store, was going to be a soldier. Reactions were mixed. Some admired her courage. Others whispered, "That girl has no idea what she's getting into," said Mrs. Peterson at the diner. "The Army will eat her alive," added Bill from the auto shop. "She's too soft, too small." Jessica's mom, Susan, supported her daughter's choice. The worry lines creased her forehead. "Honey, are you sure about this? The military is very different from our quiet life here." Jessica hugged her mom tightly. "Mom, I've never been more sure. Grandpa always said I had the heart of a fighter. Maybe it's time I found out if he was right." The weeks before leaving were tough. Some old friends treated her differently, like she was already someone they didn't know. Her boyfriend, Chad, broke up with her. He said he couldn't date someone playing soldier. "You're making a huge mistake, Jessica," Chad had said. "Girls like you aren't meant for that life." But Jessica's grandpa had prepared her for doubt. "People will always tell you what you can't do," he'd said many times. "The question is whether you'll listen to them or to the voice inside your own heart." On her last night at home, Jessica sat on the porch with her grandpa. They watched the Iowa sunset paint the sky in oranges and pinks. He handed her a small wooden box. "This was your grandma's," he said quietly. "She gave it to me before I shipped out. It brought me luck and brought me home to her." Inside the box was a simple silver chain with a small cross pendant. Jessica fastened it around her neck. She felt the weight of generations of courage settle on her shoulders. "Remember, kiddo," her grandpa said, using her dad's pet name for her, "courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and doing what's right anyway." The bus to Fort Leonard Wood left at dawn. Jessica's family gathered at the small bus station. Her mom cried quietly. Her grandpa stood at attention and saluted her. Her younger brother, Mike, promised to write letters every week. As the bus pulled away from Harmony Creek, Jessica pressed her face to the window. She watched her old life grow smaller. She was heading into the unknown, carrying only determination and her grandpa's lessons about honor, courage, and never giving up. The other passengers were mostly young men, also heading to basic training. They talked loudly. They bragged about how if they were, how easy training would be. They would show everyone what real soldiers looked like. Jessica listened quietly, her hand touching the cross at her throat. She knew her real test would begin in just a few hours. Everything she thought she knew about herself was about to be challenged. The girl from Harmony Creek was about to become something entirely new, though she didn't yet know what. Fort Leonard would hit Jessica like a slap. The bus had barely stopped when a drill sergeant, with a voice like thunder, started shouting. Jessica grabbed her small duffel bag. She joined a line of nervous young people stumbling off the bus into the Missouri heat. Welcome to hell, ladies and gentlemen, Drill Sergeant Rodriguez bellowed. For the next 10 weeks, your mama can't help you. Your daddy can't save you. And your girlfriend won't even remember your name. Jessica found herself next to a tall, muscular young man named Kyle. He whispered, "This is going to be easier than I thought. Look at some of these people. That little girl there doesn't look like she can handle a water gun, let alone a real rifle." He was talking about her. Jessica kept her eyes forward. She said nothing, but her cheeks burned with embarrassment and anger. The first few days were a blur. Medical checks, uniform fittings, endless paperwork. Jessica was assigned to Delta Company, a 3rd Platoon. Her bunk was in a long room with 30 other female recruits. She quickly learned that privacy was a thing of the past. Her bunkmate was Ashley, a loud girl from Chicago who had joined the army to pay for college. "I can't believe they expect us to do the same training as the men," Ashley complained on their second night. "I mean, we're obviously not built the same way." Jessica kept folding her clothes in the precise way they had been taught. "Maybe that's the point," she said quietly. "To prove we can do it anyway." Ashley rolled her eyes. "Easy for you to say. You look like you've never lifted anything heavier than a textbook." The comment stung, but Jessica remembered her grandpa's words about letting actions speak louder than words. She would show them when the time came. Physical training began at dawn every day. Jessica surprised herself by keeping up with the running, push-ups, and obstacle courses. Her small frame was an advantage in some exercises. All those years helping her grandpa with yard work had built more muscle than anyone realized. But it was during weapons training that everything changed. On a hot Thursday morning, the platoon marched to the rifle range. Drill Sergeant Rodriguez stood before them, holding an M4 carbine like it was a sacred object. "This weapon will become your best friend," he announced. "It will keep you alive when everything else fails. Some of you will master it. Some of you will struggle. And some of you," his eyes seemed to find Jessica in the group, "will probably be better off in the kitchen." The male recruits laughed. Even some of the female recruits smiled. Jessica felt her face grow hot, but she kept her expression neutral. They spent the morning learning to disassemble and clean the rifles. Jessica's hands moved with confidence and speed. Muscle memory from all those afternoons with her grandpa took over. Other recruits fumbled with the parts. Jessica had her weapons stripped, cleaned, and reassembled before most people had figured out how to remove the bolt. Drill Sergeant Miller, a shorter, quieter instructor, noticed Jessica's skill. "Where did you learn to handle a weapon like that, recruit?" "My grandpa taught me." "Drill Sergeant," Jessica replied, standing at attention. "Your grandpa, huh? What branch?" "Army Rangers." "Drill Sergeant, 2 tours in Iraq." Drill Sergeant Miller nodded with something that might have been respect. "We'll see if he taught you how to shoot, not just how to clean." The afternoon was dedicated to actual shooting. The recruits lined up at the firing positions, each given 20 rounds. The targets were set at a standard distance for beginners. Kyle positioned himself next to Jessica, grinning confidently. "Hope you brought earplugs, sweetheart. I'm about to show everyone how real shooting is done." Other male recruits gathered around, making jokes. They bet on who would score the lowest among the women. Jessica settled into her firing position. She felt the familiar weight of the rifle against her shoulder. She closed her eyes for a moment. She could almost hear her grandpa's voice. "Breathe steady. Find your target. Let the shot surprise you." When the command came to commence firing, the range erupted in noise. Jessica blocked out everything: the shouting, the laughter, the sound of other rifles. She focused on her breathing, her sight alignment. In the center of the distant target, her first shot hit dead center. So did her second, and her third. By the time the ceasefire command was given, Jessica had put 19 of her 20 shots in the center ring. Her 20th shot was only slightly off minus center. Kyle had managed to hit the target 12 times out of 20, with only 3 shots anywhere near the center. Most other recruits had similar or worse results. When the range officers called out the scores, a hush fell over the group. Miller, Jessica 19 out of 20 center hits. Outstanding score. The silence was deafening. And Cal spoke up, his voice carrying across the range. She got lucky. Beginner's luck, that's all. But Jessica knew it wasn't luck. It was years of practice, patience, and her grandpa's steady guidance. As she cleaned her rifle that evening, she smiled for the first time since arriving at Fort Leonard Wood. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but today she had proven something important to herself. She belonged here. Word of Jessica's shooting performance spread through the company like wildfire. By dinner that evening, everyone knew about the small girl from Iowa who had outshot most of the men on her first day at the range. The reactions were not what Jessica had hoped for. Instead of respect, she faced suspicion and resentment. Kyle gathered a group of male recruits around their table in the mess hall. He spoke just loud enough for Jessica to hear from across the room. "I'm telling you, something's not right," he said, stabbing at his mashed potatoes. "Nobody shoots that well on their first try. She must have had special training or something." "Maybe she cheated somehow," added Tom, a recruit from Ohio who had scored poorly. "I saw her talking to that drill sergeant before we started shooting." Jessica tried to focus on her dinner, but their words cut deep. Ashley leaned over and whispered, "Just ignore them. They're embarrassed because a girl showed them up." Ignoring them became impossible as the days went on. During physical training, the male recruits would make comments about Jessica needing to prove herself in other areas. During classroom instruction, they would whisper and point when she answered questions correctly. The worst part was that some of the female recruits began to distance themselves, too. They worried that being associated with Jessica would make them targets for the same treatment. "Look, Jessica," Ashley said one evening as they prepared for lights out, "maybe you should tone it down a little. You're making everyone uncomfortable." "Tone down what?" Jessica asked, genuinely confused. "I'm just doing my best, like we're supposed to." "That's exactly the problem," Ashley replied. "Your best is making the rest of us look bad." Jessica lay in her hero bunk that night, staring at the ceiling and fighting back tears. She had joined the army to serve her country and honor her grandpa's memory, not to become an outcast among her own unit. The next few days brought more weapons training. Each session only made things worse. Jessica consistently outperformed her fellow recruits, not because she was showing off, but because her grandpa had taught her that anything worth doing was worth doing excellently. During a lesson on field stripping weapons under time pressure, Jessica finished her M4 in record time. Others were still struggling with the first few components. Drill Sergeant Rodriguez called attention to her performance, which only fueled more resentment. "Miller sets the standard," he announced. "The rest of you need to catch up." After the session, Kyle cornered Jessica outside the armory. "You think you're special, don't you?" he said, his face red with anger. "You think because you can take apart a gun fast, you're better than us?" "I don't think I'm better than anyone," Jessica replied quietly. "I'm just doing what we're trained to do." "You're showing off," Tom added, joining the confrontation. "And it's making all of us look stupid." More recruits gathered, forming a circle. Jessica felt trapped and intimidated, but she remembered her grandpa's lessons about standing up for herself with dignity. "If you want to improve your scores, I'd be happy to help you practice," she offered, trying to defuse the situation. The suggestion backfired spectacularly. The male recruits took it as an insult, as if she was looking down on them. Even some of the female recruits shook their heads. "We don't need help from someone who thinks she's any Oakley," Kyle sneered. That night, Jessica found herself completely isolated. No one would sit with her at dinner. No one would partner with her during exercises. Conversations stopped when she entered a room. The loneliness was crushing. She wrote a letter to her grandpa, pouring out her frustrations and doubts. She told him about her shooting success, but also about how it had made her a target for bullying and isolation. She asked him if she was doing something wrong, if she should hold back to fit in better. Before she could mail the letter, she received one from him. It was as if he had sensed her struggle across the miles. My dear Jessica, the letter began in his careful handwriting. I know these first weeks are difficult. I know there will be people who don't understand why you're there or what you're capable of. But I want you to remember something important. Your job is not to make others comfortable with your excellence. Your job is to be the best soldier you can be. The letter continued. When I was in Iraq, there was a soldier in my unit who was an incredible marksman. The other men resented him because he made their shooting look poor in comparison. But when we were pinned down by enemy fire, guess who y'all wanted covering us? Excellence in a soldier isn't about ego or showing off. It's about being ready to protect the people next to you when it matters most. Jessica read the letter 3 times before folding it carefully and placing it in her footlocker. Her grandpa was right. She hadn't joined the army to make friends or to make others feel comfortable. She had joined to serve, and service required excellence, not mediocrity. The next morning brought another round of weapons training, this time with more advanced techniques. Jessica approached the range with renewed determination. She would continue to do her best, regardless of how others reacted. As she settled into her firing position, she heard the familiar whispers and comments. At this time, instead of feeling hurt or isolated, she felt focused. Her grandpa's words echoed in her mind. Excellence wasn't about ego. It was about being ready to protect others when it mattered most. The targets were set at a greater distance this time. The conditions were more challenging. Jessica took a deep breath, found her sight picture, and began to shoot. One by one, her bullets found their mark with precision that even surprised her. When the scores were announced, Jessica had achieved another near-minus perfect result. This time, instead of silence, there was open hostility from some recruits. But Jessica also noticed something else. A few of the instructors were watching her with new interest, and 1 or 2 recruits looked at her with something that might have been grudging respect. Change was coming, though Jessica didn't know it yet. Her consistent excellence was being noticed by people who mattered, and soon everything would shift in ways she couldn't imagine. 3 weeks into basic training, everything changed during what should have been a routine field exercise. The entire company participated in a simulated combat scenario in the woods surrounding Fort Leonard Wood. Each platoon was assigned different objectives. Jessica's group was tasked with securing a strategic position on a hilltop. The exercise began at dawn. Jessica carried her equipment through the thick Missouri forest, trying to keep pace with her unit while maintaining the careful spacing they had been taught. Despite the ongoing tension with her fellow recruits, she focused on the mission. Drill Sergeant Rodriguez and several other instructors observed from various positions, taking notes on each recruit's performance. Jessica knew this exercise would count toward their final evaluations. She pushed aside thoughts of the isolation and concentrated on doing her job properly. Halfway through the morning, their unit was attacked by opposing forces, other recruits playing the role of enemy soldiers. The simulation used blank ammunition and special sensors to determine hits and casualties. Jessica's platoon was supposed to establish defensive positions and hold their ground. As the mock battle began, chaos erupted. Recruits scattered to find cover behind trees and rocks, shouting commands and firing blank rounds. Jessica found herself positioned behind a fallen log with Kyle and Tom, the same recruits who had given her the most trouble. Stay down and try not to mess this up, Kyle hissed at her as blanks whizzed overhead. But as the exercise continued, it became clear their platoon was in serious trouble. The opposing force had superior positioning and was systematically picking off Jessica's unit members, one by one. Recruits were marked as casualties by the observing instructors. From her position, Jessica could see something others couldn't. The enemy force had a sniper positioned in a tree about 200 yards away. He was methodically targeting anyone who exposed themselves. This sniper was the key to the opposing team's success, and he needed to be neutralized. Child, Jessica whispered urgently. There's a sniper in that oak tree. I can take him out, but I need covering fire. I'll turn to look at her with disbelief. You take out a sniper at that distance? This isn't target practice, Miller. That's advanced minus level shooting. I can make the shot, Jessica insisted. But we need to act fast before he eliminates more of our people. Tom laughed bitterly. Right. The little girl thinks she's going to save the day. This is real tactical shooting, not plinking cans in your backyard. Well, they argued. Another member of their unit was marked as a casualty. Then another. Their position was becoming hopeless. Jessica made a decision that would define the rest of her military career. Without waiting for permission or approval from Kyle and Tom, she adjusted her position to get a clear line of sight to the sniper's location. The distance was challenging. The target was partially concealed by branches, and the pressure was enormous. She controlled her breathing exactly as her grandpa had taught her, found her sight picture, and accounted for the slight breeze. The forest seemed to grow quiet around her as she focused everything on that single shot. The blank round fired with a sharp crack. Through her scope, Jessica watched as the opposing sniper slumped forward, hit squarely in the center mass. The instructor positioned near the tree raised his flag, confirming the successful elimination. With their sniper neutralized, Jessica's unit was able to rally and complete their objective. The opposing forces, deprived of their tactical advantage, were systematically defeated by Jessica's remaining teammates. When the exercise ended, an unusual quiet settled over the forest. Drill Sergeant Rodriguez approached Jessica's position with a serious expression. "Miller," he called out, front and center. Jessica's heart sank. She was certain she was about to be disciplined for taking action without orders. She approached the drill sergeant and stood at attention. That was a 2-100- yard shot on a concealed target, Drill Sergeant Rodriguez said, his voice carrying across the forest so everyone could hear. Under combat conditions, with live tactical pressure, he paused, looking directly at Jessica. I've been training recruits for 12 years. I've seen maybe 3 people make a shot like that during basic training. All of them were male recruits who came from military families with extensive hunting backgrounds. The other recruits gathered, their expressions a mixture of amazement and disbelief. Kyle and Tom stood with their mouths open, unable to process what they had witnessed. Where exactly did you learn to shoot like that, recruit? Drill Sergeant Rodriguez asked. My grandpa, Drill Sergeant, Jessica replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. He taught me that shooting isn't about strength or size. It's about patience, focus, and respect for the weapon. Drill Sergeant Rodriguez nodded slowly. Your grandpa taught you well. That shot just saved your entire unit's mission. As they walked back to base, the dynamic within Jessica's platoon began to shift. The whispers continued, but now they carried a different tone. Instead of dismissal and mockery, there was genuine curiosity and even grudging admiration. Ashley approached Jessica during the march back. I've never seen anything like that, she said quietly. How did you know you could make that shot? I didn't know for certain, Jessica admitted, but I knew someone had to try, and I knew I had the best chance of success. Even Kyle seemed different. He walked alongside Jessica for part of the journey back, not saying much, but no longer radiating the hostility that had characterized their previous interactions. That evening at dinner, Jessica noticed that the empty space around her table was smaller. A few recruits actually nodded at her as she passed. The complete isolation was beginning to crack, replaced by something that might eventually become respect. But Jessica also realized that her life in the army was about to become much more complicated. Word of her exceptional shooting ability would spread beyond her basic training unit. People would have expectations, and those expectations would bring both opportunities and challenges she couldn't yet imagine. As she cleaned her rifle that night, Jessica thought about her grandpa's words. Excellence isn't about showing off. It's about being ready to protect others when it matters most. Today, for the first time, she had used her skills to protect her fellow soldiers, even those who had treated her poorly. Maybe that was what being a real soldier meant. And news of Jessica's extraordinary shot during the field exercise spread through Fort Leonard Wood like wildfire. By the next morning, Drill sergeants from other companies were discussing the small recruit from Iowa who had made a 2-100-yard shot that most experienced soldiers would struggle with. Captain Davis, the commanding officer of Jessica's company, hauled her into his office 3 days after the exercise. Jessica stood at attention before his desk, unsure whether she was in trouble or being recognized. "At ease, Miller," Captain Davis said, gesturing to a chair. "I've been hearing interesting things about your marksmanship abilities." Jessica remained standing. "Yes, sir. I do my best to meet the Army standard." "Sir," Captain Davis smiled slightly. "From what I understand, you're exceeding those standards by a considerable margin. Tell me about your background with firearms." Jessica explained about her grandpa's training, the years of practice, and her philosophy about respect for weapons. Captain Davis listened intently, occasionally asking questions about her techniques and experience. "I'm going to be direct with you, Miller," he said finally. "The Army has a special program for exceptional marksmen. It's called the Designated Marksman Program, and participants receive advanced training that goes far beyond basic marksmanship." Jessica's pulse quickened. "What that involves, sir?" "Specialized weapons, advanced ballistics, tactical shooting, and eventually assignment to units that need precision shooters. It's challenging, and not everyone who tries makes it through the program." He leaned forward. "But here's the thing, Miller. This program has traditionally been dominated by male soldiers. You would be walking into an environment where you'd face skepticism, possibly hostility, and definitely intense scrutiny." Jessica thought about the challenges she had already faced in basic training. "With respect, sir, I've been dealing with skepticism and hostility since I arrived here. If the Army thinks I have the skills for this program, I'd like the opportunity to prove myself." Captain Davis nodded approvingly. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. I'm recommending you for evaluation by the program instructors. They'll be here next week to observe some of our top shooters." The news that Jessica was being considered for an advanced marksmanship program created another wave of reaction among her fellow recruits. This time, however, the responses were more mixed than purely negative. Some recruits, particularly those who had witnessed her field exercise performance, began to show genuine respect. They started asking her for shooting tips and including her in conversations about military tactics. "I still can't believe that shot you made," said Mike, a recruit from California who had previously ignored her. "Could you show me how you set up your breathing for long-distance shots?" Jessica found herself in the strange position of becoming an informal instructor for her peers. During free time, small groups of recruits would ask her to demonstrate shooting positions or explain sight alignment techniques. The attention also brought new challenges. Kyle and his core group of supporters became more resentful as Jessica's reputation grew. Now she thinks she's too good for regular Army training. Kyle complained to anyone who would listen. "They're going to put her in some special program while the rest of us do the real work." Tom added his own commentary. "I bet when she gets to a real unit, all this target shooting won't mean anything. Combat is different from playing games on a range." Jessica tried to ignore the negative comments, but they stung. She had never asked for special attention or treatment. She simply wanted to serve her country to the best of her abilities. The evaluation day arrived with gray skies and a steady drizzle that made conditions on the range challenging. 3 instructors from the Designated Marksman Program came to observe Jessica and to other recruits who had shown exceptional shooting abilities. Master Sergeant Kolsky, the lead instructor, was a weathered veteran with over 20 years of military service. He watched Jessica with skeptical eyes as she prepared for the evaluation. "I've heard impressive things about you, Miller," he said in a gravelly voice, "but I've also seen a lot of recruits who can shoot well on a calm day with perfect conditions fall apart when the pressure increases." The evaluation consisted of multiple shooting tests under varying conditions. Jessica would have to demonstrate accuracy at different distances, from different positions, and under time pressure that simulated combat stress. Her first test was shooting from a prone position at 300 yards. Despite the rain and wind, Jessica managed to put 8 of 10 shots in the center ring. The instructors exchanged glances but made no comments. The second test involved shooting from standing and kneeling positions at shorter distances, but with very limited time for each shot. This test was designed to evaluate quick target acquisition and steady shooting under pressure. Jessica's performance was flawless. Every shot found its mark, and her speed exceeded the requirements by a significant margin. For the final test, Master Sergeant Kowalski set up a scenario that mimicked the field exercise where Jessica had first demonstrated her exceptional abilities. Targets were placed at various distances and partially concealed, requiring both precision and tactical thinking. This time, he announced, "You're not just being evaluated on marksmanship. You're being evaluated on decision minus making target prioritizations and tactical shooting." Jessica studied the range carefully. She identified 5 different targets at distances ranging from 100 to 250 yards. Some were clearly marked as high-minus priority threats, while others represented civilian non-minus combatants that must not be engaged. When the whistle blew, Jessica engaged each target in order of tactical priority. She made split-minus-second decisions about which shots to take and which to avoid. Her accuracy remained perfect, and her tactical decisions were sound. When the evaluation ended, Master Sergeant Kowalski approached Jessica with a serious expression. "Miller, in 20 years of running this program, I've seen 3 recruits achieve perfect scores on this evaluation." He paused, looking at her with new respect. "You just became the 4th, and you're the first woman to even attempt it." The other recruits who had watched the evaluation stood in stunned silence. Even Kyle seemed at a loss for words. "Report to my office tomorrow morning at 800 hours, Master Sergeant Kowalski continued. "We need to discuss your future in the United States Army." As Jessica walked back to the barracks that evening, she realized her life was about to change dramatically. The girl from small-minus town Iowa, who had been mocked for her shooting abilities, was about to enter a world that few soldiers ever experienced. But she also knew that her biggest challenges still lay ahead. 6 months after completing the designated marksman program with the highest scores in the program's history, Staff Sergeant Jessica Miller found herself deployed to Afghanistan with the 82nd Airborne Division. Her reputation as an exceptional marksman had preceded her, but she still faced the challenge of proving herself to a new unit in actual combat conditions. Her squad leader, Sergeant First Class Johnson, was a veteran of 3 previous deployments. He had seen too many soldiers who looked good on paper fail when bullets started flying for real. "I don't care what kind of scores you posted in training, Miller," he told her on her first day with the unit. "Out here, the only thing that matters is whether you can keep your team alive when things get serious." Jessica understood his skepticism. She had learned that respect in the military was earned through performance under pressure, not through reputation or test scores. Her opportunity came during her 3rd week in country. Jessica's platoon was conducting a patrol in a dangerous valley where enemy fighters regularly ambushed American forces. Intelligence reports suggested that insurgents were planning an attack on a supply convoy scheduled to pass through the area. The patrol was moving through a narrow mountain pass when the attack began. Enemy fighters positioned on the ridgeline above opened fire with automatic weapons, pinning down Jessica's unit in an exposed position with little cover. "We're taking heavy fire from multiple positions," Sergeant Johnson shouted into his radio, calling for backup and air support. "We need immediate assistance." But help was 20 minutes away, and the enemy fire was intensifying. Several soldiers were wounded, and the unit's medic was trapped in an exposed position where he couldn't reach the injured men. From her covered position behind a boulder, Jessica could see the source of their problems. 3 enemy fighters with machine guns were positioned in fortified positions along the ridge, approximately 400 yards away. Their elevated position gave them clear sight lines to the entire valley floor, making it impossible for her unit to move or maneuver. "Sarge," Jessica called out over the sound of gunfire, "I can see their positions. Give me covering fire and I can take them out." "Negative, Miller," Johnson replied. "Those are long-range shots under combat conditions. We need to wait for air support." But as Jessica watched, another soldier was hit. The wounded man's cries for help filled the air. She knew that waiting 20 minutes for backup might mean watching more of her teammates die. Jessica made the same kind of decision she had made during that field exercise months ago in Missouri. Sometimes leadership meant taking action, even when others doubted your abilities. She repositioned herself to get the best possible shooting angle, despite the bullets hitting the rocks around her. Her heart was racing, but her hands remained steady as she acquired her first target through her rifle scope. The distance was challenging. The target was partially concealed, and enemy bullets were impacting all around her. But Jessica controlled her breathing, found her sight picture, and took the shot. First enemy machine gunner dropped immediately. Jessica quickly shifted to the second position and fired again. Another direct hit. The third fighter, realizing his comrades were down, attempted to relocate. Jessica tracked his movement through her scope and fired a third time just as he thought he had reached safety. Suddenly, the valley fell quiet. The devastating enemy fire that had pinned down Jessica's entire platoon for nearly 10 minutes had been eliminated by 3 precisely placed shots. Holy! One of the soldiers whispered, his voice carrying in the sudden silence. Sergeant Johnson stared at Jessica with an expression of complete amazement. Miller, did you just neutralize 3 enemy positions with 3 shots at 400 yards? Yes, Sergeant, Jessica replied simply. Already scanning for additional threats, the medic was finally able to reach the wounded soldiers, and the patrol was able to complete its mission safely. But word of Jessica's performance spread through the base camp within hours. That evening, Jessica received a visit from Colonel Thompson, the battalion commander. He found her cleaning her rifle in the armory, the same methodical process her grandpa had taught her years ago. Staff Sergeant Miller, Colonel Thompson said, his voice carrying the authority of his rank, I've been hearing remarkable reports about today's action. Jessica stood at attention. Just doing my job, sir. 3 enemy combatants eliminated with 3 shots at 400 yards while under heavy fire, the colonel continued. Sergeant Johnson tells me those shots saved multiple American lives today. Jessica remained at attention, but said nothing. She had learned that in the military, it was often better to let your actions speak rather than your words. Colonel Thompson studied her for a long moment. I'm recommending you for a Bronze Star Medal for your actions today. But more importantly, I want you to know that you've earned something that can't be awarded with the medal, sir. The complete respect of every soldier in this battalion. Sergeant Johnson spent 30 minutes telling me how he had misjudged your capabilities. The men who were pinned down in that valley today owe their lives to your skill and courage. After the colonel left, Jessica sat alone in the armory, thinking about the long journey that had brought her to this moment. She remembered the mocking laughter of her classmates in Harmony Creek when she announced she was joining the army. She thought about Kyle and Tom's sneers during basic training, and the people who had told her she was too small, too weak, or too inexperienced to be a real soldier. But most of all, she thought about her grandpa's letter and his words about excellence being preparation to protect others when it mattered most. Today, for the first time in combat, she had used her abilities to save the lives of her fellow soldiers. 2 days later, the entire battalion gathered for a ceremony. Jessica stood before hundreds of soldiers as Colonel Thompson pinned the Bronze Star Medal to her uniform. But the real recognition came from her squad mates, who had gone from skeptical colleagues to fierce advocates. I want to say something, Sergeant Johnson announced after the official ceremony ended. 6 months ago, when I heard they were assigning a female designated marksman to my squad, I thought it was a mistake. I thought she would be a liability in combat. He looked directly at Jessica. I was wrong. Staff Sergeant Miller isn't just a good soldier. She's one of the finest marksmen I'd ever served with, and I'd follow her into combat anywhere. The applause from her fellow soldiers was overwhelming. These were hardened combat veterans who had initially doubted her abilities, but who now trusted her completely. Who had completed his own training and been assigned to a different unit, sent Jessica a letter a few weeks later. In it, he apologized for his behavior during basic training. He admitted that his mockery had been based on his own insecurities rather than any real assessment of her abilities. "You showed all of us what real courage and skill look like," he wrote. "I'm proud to serve in the same army as you." Jessica's deployment ended 8 months later. She had participated in dozens of missions, saved countless lives with her precision shooting, and earned the unwavering respect of everyone who served alongside her. The girl who had been mocked for picking up a rifle had become one of the most respected soldiers in her entire division. When she returned home to Harmony Creek for leave, the entire town turned out to welcome her. The same people who had once whispered that she would never make it as a soldier now spoke with pride about their local hero. Her grandpa, now in his 80s but still sharp, waited for her on the front porch of their old house. As Jessica walked up the familiar steps in her dress uniform, medals gleaming on her chest, he stood and saluted her with tears in his eyes. "I always knew you had the heart of a fighter," he said, embracing his granddaughter. "But you've become something even more important than that. You've become a leader." Jessica looked out over the small Iowa town where her journey had begun. Thinking about all the challenges she had faced and overcome, she had proven that courage, skill, and determination mattered more than what others expected based on appearances. But most importantly, she had learned that true strength wasn't about proving others wrong. It was about staying true to your principles, protecting those who counted on you, and never letting anyone else's limitations become your own. The girl they had mocked for taking up a rifle had indeed outshot the whole unit. But more than that, she had shown them all what it meant to be a soldier.